Hello, everyone. Welcome. It's good to have you here. I see more people are coming in. However, we are at the top of the hour, and I would like to slowly start with the presentation. The presentation will be for 1 hour, and then we'll have the questions and answers session in the end. So let me share my screen. Okay. Welcome again. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Panagiotta Kondorleon, and I am originally from Athens, Greece. I am part of the Radiant Life Technologies team, the COMRA team, for a decade now. And my calling is to help people help themselves. I love this photo. It's from our conference a year and a half ago. I am a certified COMRA practitioner and hold a master's degree in counseling psychology and psychotherapy. My training is in integrative psychology, which uses a holistic approach to treatment. Integrative psychotherapists use multiple treatment approaches because no two people are the same, yeah? So many people will benefit from a combination of treatment styles. And unlike the traditional mental health practices, integrative psychology utilizes different schools of psychology as we view the individual as whole, so we work with them in a holistic approach. I'm also a member of APA, the American Psychologist Association, based on my post-secondary US education and American citizenship as well. The COMRA webinar series, for those of you who have watched the previous ones, you know that are based on true healing. And today I will do my best to discuss psychological self-healing. I want to thank the COMRA webinar team who supported me in the creation of this presentation. And without further ado, I will move on. I would kindly ask you to take notes or post your questions in the chat. My friend Maxime is supporting me. Thank you, Maxime. And I will do my best to answer them in the end if you have not found your own answers during the presentation. So psychological healing is a vast subject, okay? And definitely not something that I would attempt to address in just 1 hour today. The psyche has been the subject of philosophical discussions and debates for many, many centuries already, before psychology appeared as a scientific method to explain this invisible aspect of us, right? As well as mental and emotional states. You may already know that there are different approaches to psychotherapy, and based on APA, there are 5 main approaches. The psychoanalytic psychodynamic therapy, this is based on Sigmund Freud, the behavior therapy, the cognitive therapy, humanistic therapy, and integrative or holistic therapy, on which my training is based. As you can see, under these approaches, there are many branches, and under these branches, there are even more types, which are beyond the scope of this presentation. So before we begin, I would like to take a minute or two to define some words, which I will be using throughout the presentation, perhaps in a slightly different way than expected. So the word psychology derives from the Greek word psychologia. And the etymology has two roots. The word psyche, which means psyche, and the word logia, which means study. So I will use the word psyche interchangeably with the word soul, as in Greek, in our mythology, the Psyche was actually the goddess of the soul. So psychology, as we see, means the study of the soul. Psychology is one model we use to learn, to get in touch with reality, and we must not get stuck in the model, rather use it as a mirror of our psyche, which I will do today. Now, the self. The earliest formulation of the self in modern psychology forms the distinction between the self as I and the self as me. The I is the true self, the liberated, the divine soul, okay, as it is connected with everything. And this part is often called the observing self, the witness, the higher self, or the true self, as I will be referring to it from now on. The me part is the little self, the part that identifies with the self-image, the fake identity that we consider to be ourself. And it is based on a conglomeration of recurring thought forms and conditioned mental and emotional patterns, resulting in a distorted perception of the self. So it's often called the ego, the superficial self, or the little self, which is how I will be mostly referring to it from now on. Now, what we see here is what seems to be a duality of the self. And I will later on elaborate on this and will share personal examples for better understanding. So for now, it suffices to say that the connection with the truth, with the one truth, with divinity, is only through our true self. Now, healing derives from the Old English word healen, which literally means to make whole. And when do we need to make something whole? When it is broken into pieces, right? Into parts. So when we discuss physiology, a disease is a result of an imbalance. And when we discuss psychology, a mental disorder is a result of an internal conflict. Both result in separation inside, the creation of little parts inside which are not in harmony. So therefore, healing is a process of restoration of this imbalance, this internal conflict. And the first step to healing is awareness, as everything starts from there. Thus, in order to begin the journey of our psychological self-healing, if we read from right to left now, backwards, that is, the first step is to be aware of this imbalance, this internal conflict inside of us, and connect with our true self to come in touch with reality. And when I say reality, I refer to the one truth, not what we think reality is. And this is the journey to healing. Now, as I said, the first step towards this journey is awareness. And I would like to define this word as well, so that we're all on the same page. Now, awareness derives from the Latin word verere, which means to be fearful, to have a sense of fear, which is useful in order for us to be wide awake and alert. So 2 weeks ago, actually, I hosted a webinar here in Greece about the fear of conflict, and it was essential to explain the difference between the sense of fear and the fear as a debilitating state. Now, a sense of fear helps protect you. It makes you alert to danger, right? Prepares you to deal with it. It's actually very natural and very helpful. To give you an example, as a swimmer, I will use an example in this context. Let's say someone who isn't a strong swimmer might have a sense of fear of deep water. In this case, the fear is helpful because it cautions the person to stay safe. Someone could overcome this sense of fear by learning how to swim safely. Further on, in order to truly relate with ourselves and others, we need to respect the relationship, a word which I would also like to define as we often use it in a slightly different way. So respect derives from the Latin verb respecere, the roots of which are the word re, which means back, again, and the verb specere, which means look. So the word respect means look again, look beyond the face value to see what is really going on. In order to have a true relationship with yourselves, others, and the world around you, that is how well you connect, you relate to yourself and others, you need to have awareness and respect your state of being so that you're able to do the same for the other person's state of being. Because let's be honest, if you're fast asleep and take yourselves for granted, it is not possible to relate properly, is it? And this is the beginning of the internal conflicts and imbalances which bring about diseases and mental disorders. Now, we'll be revisiting these concepts and their meanings in the course of the presentation when needed. Okay, now that we defined these important words and concepts, let us start the journey of healing by discussing the psyche. In order to explain as best as possible and in a light and fun way today, the process of the liberation of the soul, the true healing, I will borrow the tools of narrative psychology and will tell you a story. And as a good Greek, it is a myth, an allegory of Plato's Republic called the Phaedrus myth, the myth of the winged soul. Phaedrus means bright or radiant, and in this myth, Socrates discusses with Phaedrus unconditional love and is narrating the nature of the human soul using an allegory of the chariot. So the myth goes like this. Souls, both divine and human, travel to heaven. Each one is depicted as a winged chariot drawn by two horses and driven by a charioteer. The charioteer is the mental, the logical part of the soul, the part that has the ability to think, to reason, to evaluate, to reckon, to judge rightfully judgment, and it is the eyes of the soul. Its role is to control the horses, and the virtue is wisdom. One of the horses is the steed, which symbolizes the spirited part of the soul, the part associated with our emotions and volition. It is the part of our soul that arms us with courage and gallantry to overcome obstacles, to tackle challenges, and to do what the charioteer requires. The virtue of the steed is bravery. The other horse symbolizes the appetitive part. Okay, now appetitive derives from the word appetite, meaning the part of the soul connected to the desire to satisfy bodily needs, such as the need for food, reproduction, and is also connected with noble desires. The virtue of the appetitive horse is prudence. Now, as the souls travel, they reach a point where the area beyond the heavens becomes visible. And this is where true being, truth itself, is to be found. The horses of the divine souls are good and calm. They follow the commands of the charioteer, who holds the reins firmly. The liberated souls can thus contemplate undisturbed the essence and the truth of things, pure love. Therefore, when these three parts of the soul are in harmony, they are perfectly winged, they are coherent, then they soar upwards and the soul experiences beauty, wisdom, and goodness. Well, this is not the case with the human souls, the non-liberated ones. Here, the horses behave differently, and as you see, they are different in color. The horse that symbolizes the spirited part, the high mind, the noble part, is white. Its body is upright in frame and well jointed. Its neck is high and it has a regal nose and black eyes. It's a lover of honor with humility and self-control. It's also a lover of truth. It needs no whip and is guided only by verbal commands. The other horse, though, which symbolizes the appetitive part, is black and untamed. Its body is crooked, fat, and ill-shaped. It has a thick, short neck, broad face, and gray bloodshot eyes. It's also deaf. This horse tends towards hubris and arrogance, and barely obeys to the stings and the lashes of the charioteer with the whip. In some human souls, the charioteers raise their head to see what lies beyond heaven. The horses, however, do not obey all the commands. The attention of the charioteers is drawn away from what they see and focus on controlling the chariot. Thus, these souls can see a great part, but not the whole truth. The horses of some other human souls are more untamed. They do not obey commands, they do not coordinate their movements, and drag the chariots downwards. The charioteers try to control them by pulling the reins firmly, and only occasionally they're able to turn their heads to the region beyond heaven. As a result, they can see only a small part of the one truth. And the horses of some human souls are extremely wild. They whinny, they rear up on their legs, they run into one another while the charioteers struggle to stay upright. And no matter how hard they try, they are unable to control the chariots. The souls are trampled. One drags the other, their wings are destroyed, and they never manage to catch a glimpse of the truth. Now, Plato used this allegory to represent the inner conflict I was telling you before of these three parts, which bring about imbalance and disease. He claims that the prerequisite for mental health is the harmonization of these three parts of our psyche, and in fact, so that the mental part decides, the emotional and volition part provides the necessary strength to achieve the goal, and the appetitive part to satisfy basic needs, always obeying the choices of the eyes of the soul. Now, Plato, later on, used an image to depict this inner conflict for better understanding. The mental part of the soul is represented by man. The part related to emotions and volition is represented by a lion, and the appetitive part is represented by a multi-headed beast. Now, if man lets the lion and the beast become stronger at the expense of the man, then they will fight fiercely, leading him to an unholy life, a slave to his opposing desires and passions, as well as outbursts of his rage. But if man manages to tame the beast with the help of the lion, then he will be able to discipline his desires and uproot his passions in order to enjoy the pleasure of harmony in his soul and experience the one truth, the unconditional love. A very important note here before I move on is that Plato by no means suggested that the man should try to annihilate the beast or the lion within. On the contrary, what Plato proposes to man is to satisfy the desire in a balanced way, so that it is not hooked on deprivation or over-fulfilling. You see the two polarities. And thus, in this state of balance, to allow the man to search for true knowledge. Because if the inner conflict is managed, then there is always new knowledge, and thus the soul gets one step closer to its divinity. Now, from Plato, this was 480 BC. Let us now fast forward to the man of today, man meaning human, right, and not male. So we will embark together on a modern journey now, the journey of life. And there are two parts of it. The first part depicts how you lose connection with your true self as you grow up due to social conditioning and you identify with the self-image. And the second part is the journey of adjustment, the journey of healing that begins once you become aware that you have been ignoring your true self. You respect the relationship and you change course towards finding joy in your life. So throughout the remaining presentation, I will be sharing parts of my journey, photos of me and my life to provide some examples. So I will go between theory and examples and back and forth. And I will start with myself right away. So this is actually me here. I am a baby. This is when the journey begins. Right before we arrive in this world, our soul is one with everything around. It is like the divine soul in the Phaedrus myth. There is unity with everything. However, the moment we take our first breath and start interacting with the world around us, we start moving away from this connection due to social conditioning. Now, social conditioning is the process of being trained to respond in a manner generally approved by the society in general and peer groups within society later on. And this is when our personality starts to form. I will use two theories of psychology to briefly discuss this process. The first is Erik Erikson's theory of psychosocial development. He claims that at each stage of development, the individual is undergoing specific internal conflicts. And based on how this stage is resolved, the emotions and traits are internalized and are carried over to the next stage, and so forth and so on. Pretty much they stay there throughout your lives, unless, of course, you start working with yourselves. Now, very briefly, you can see here at the lower parts of our development, specifically the first 3 stages from birth to 6 years old. The internal conflicts have to do with trust versus mistrust. This takes place from birth to 1 year old. Autonomy versus shame or doubt from 1 year to 3 years old. And initiative versus guilt from 3 to 6 years old. What I would like to bring to your awareness with this slide is that by the age of 6 years old, there comes the mistrust, the shame, the doubt, and the guilt. It's pretty amazing, huh? Now, the second and my favorite theory that I use extensively in my practice is the attachment theory. Now, the theory of attachment was originally developed by John Bowlby in an attempt to understand the intense distress experienced by infants who had been separated from their parents. Now, Bowlby observed that separated infants would go to extraordinary lengths. They would cry, clinging, frantically searching to prevent separation from their parents or to reestablish proximity to a missing parent. Then his assistant, Mary Ainsworth, went a step further to observe how fast the children would calm down upon reestablishment of proximity with the parent. Now, if I could put a huge theory in a sentence, I would say that attachment theory views the primary caregiver, in most cases the mother, as a secure base for the child, from which the child could move away in order to explore the world around, but in case of distress, to be able to go back and feel safe again. That is, the mother needs to be there, solid and consistent. The common ground here with Erikson's theory, if you have understood, is the balance between autonomy and trust, which Erikson had in his first 2 stages of development combined from birth to 3 years of age. Now, according to Bowlby, the attachment system essentially asks one fundamental question. Is the attachment figure, in most cases the mother, nearby, accessible, attentive, and consistent in her behavior? Now, if the child perceives the answer to this question to be yes, then he or she feels loved, secure, and confident, and behaviorally is likely to explore his or her environment, play with others, and be sociable, which are very important skills, right, for a healthy development. And even when separated with the mother and experiences distress, when the mother is back, then the child is soothed right away in her arms, stops crying, and returns to the activity of playing right away. Now, this is what we call secure attachment, because there is balance between the child's autonomy to be able to go explore around or be alone for a while, and the child's ability to trust that his or her needs will be met when needed. Now, this balance is, to take you back to Phaedrus' myth, is similar to the 2 horses of the chariot, where when they work together and there is balance between the courage and bravery, similar to what is needed for the autonomy for children, and the attendance to bodily desires For the children, it is to be hugged and fed, for example. Then the charioteer can lead the chariot without any waste of energy towards unconditional love. A small note here, as adults, securely attached individuals, there are not very many, but they are more empathetic, they are better at handling conflicts, they are confident in relationships, they are willing to ask for support, and are generally positive to others and themselves. So overall, they experience joy in their lives. Now, if the child perceives the answer to the question, you remember the question, is the attachment figure nearby, accessible, attentive, and consistent in her behavior, to be no, then these children have what we call an insecure attachment style, which could be either anxious resistant or avoidant. I will explain briefly the anxious resistant attachment style. Now, these children, when they're separated from the mother or the father, become extremely distressed. They are profoundly anxious and possibly depressed. More important, when they are reunited with their mother, these children have a difficult time being soothed and often exhibit conflicting behaviors that suggest that they want to be comforted on one hand, but on the other hand, they also want to punish the parent for leaving. As adults, they are obsessive about closeness. They worry a lot about what other people think about them. They have fear of rejection. Their attachment system is hyperactivated. They're highly sensitive and vigilant to threat. They devote more cognitive resources, and they are in need for approval. Now, the avoidant children don't appear too distressed by the separation, and upon reunion, they actively avoid seeking contact with their parent. Sometimes they even turn their attention to play or do other things. So they can develop a dismissive avoidant style or a fearful one. Briefly, I will say that as adults, they prefer to live alone. They do not open up emotionally to partners. They are very independent and believe they don't need relationships or other people. They hide their feelings a lot. They think higher of themselves than others. And when they are rejected, they cope by being alone. Now, going back to Phaedra's myth, the insecurely attached children act similarly to the conflicting two horses. If you remember, Plato had proposed to man to satisfy the desire in a balanced way so that it is not hooked on deprivation or overfulfilling. And this is exactly what we see here with the insecurely attached adults. They will either be hooked on overfulfilling if they are the anxious resistant style, or deprivation, avoidance, if they are in the avoidance style. So to be aware of the way we relate as adults is critical to our psychological healing. And in my practice, I see over and over again how the penny drops for my clients when I explain the attachment theory and go through a process to identify their attachment style. And it's only then that they realize actually why they behave in a certain way. And it makes sense. Why they keep distances, for example, or they get anxious when their partner won't answer the phone or return their call right away. So just to summarize the attachment theory, based on it, if you experience balance between autonomy and trust to rely on yourself, you will be able to do it with others as well as you do it with yourself. And then you grow up to become mentally healthy as the heart and the mind cooperate intelligently, just like the charioteer and the horses in the Phaedra's myth. Now, having all that in mind, that is how important the quality of our interaction with our caregivers and our environment is as we grow up, let us see what happens now in the formative years in our early childhood when social conditioning kicks in. Now, I will share parts of my journey, as it is impossible, of course, to fit all these decades in a few slides. So please understand that not all stages of development can be covered or details to be provided. However, my hope is that you will get the picture and perhaps find yourself somewhere there. This is me now. I'm a bit older, around 3 to 4 years old. As we grow up and we interact more and more with our parents and the environment, social conditioning begins. Now, social conditioning, as explained earlier, just to define it again, is the process of training individuals to respond in a manner generally approved by the society. So social conditioning is the conduit to the formation of the self-image, the personality, the fake I, the fake identity inside the little self. So let me use a personal example about how it's formed. So as we said, social conditioning teaches us to display acceptable behaviors in front of others. And I remember distinctively that when I was little, and we as a family were visiting my aunt, my father's sister, she had the most amazing chocolates in a big round crystal serving bowl. And when we would enter, you know, as Greeks, hospitality, she would immediately offer chocolate to us. Now, one time I dared taking two, and I got a really disapproving look from my mother. Later on at home, she started giving me a lecture about what is proper and what not, and that I behaved as if I hadn't eaten for days, and my God, what the other people would think of us, blah, 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 and to never do this again. So never ask for anything again. So the message I got was that my needs are not important, and therefore they should not be met. You know, remember the attachment theory and how we need to trust that our needs will be met? So another message was that strangers were more important than me, because I felt that my mother cared more about what the other people thought of us instead of what my needs were. And I can think of many, many incidents like that at home, which were reinforcing my feeling that I'm not important. So you see that I have the I am in inverted commas because the I is the true self, remember? Now, however, as you grow up and you're socially conditioned about what is right or wrong, acceptable or unacceptable, good or bad, proper or improper, you name it, this belief goes and attaches to the I and creates the fake I, what comes from social conditioning, the self-image. So for me, it was, I am not important. Now, but for different people, it could be different things. And in my practice, I have seen a lot. For example, I'm unlovable, I'm not a good girl, I'm a bad boy, I'm a loser, I'm a bully, it's my fault, I'm bitchy, and so forth and so on. Now, as this self-image is forming, it prevents us from seeing the truth, the reality. In other words, social conditioning is like a series of lenses that distort your vision. Remember the man in Plato's myth? He was the eyes of the soul. He was the only one who could see the truth. If you have visited an ophthalmologist, you have probably experienced the process of him or her adding lenses to your vision to see with which ones you see clearly. And in the process, a lot of wrong lenses are placed and they are like fog, they blur your vision. Well, all these lenses that blur your vision are examples of layers and layers of social conditioning and distorted cognitions about yourself. And these distorted cognitions and beliefs are in their core activities of what? Of ignoring your true self. So the more the lenses that blur your vision, the more you move away from the truth, the more you ignore your true self. It's like you put a curtain in front of you and you don't see anymore. And in Phaedrus' myth, the charioteer knew where the chariots needed to go, right? Well, however, when the horses were not cooperating, the charioteer was wasting all of his energy in trying to handle the horses with the reins and was losing sight of the truth or the ultimate divine destination. The result of the social conditioning, the lenses that distort your vision is the formation of an irrational belief. Because in these formative years, you unconsciously make the wrong conclusions about yourselves. Remember the attachment theory. Based on your experiences in that very young age, from your interaction with your parents, you, most of the times, form an insecure attachment. Now, let me give you an example referring back to the incident with the chocolates. I started feeling I was not important. Of course, this was far from my truth, right? But my truth was blurred by the lenses, by all the instances in my interactions with my parents, my teachers, my peers, right? Other example I remember was my aversion to milk. I simply did not want to drink it. However, because my mother perceived that milk was good for me, she would put me on a high ledge in the garden and would not take me down unless I had drunk my milk because it was good for me. I still remember that. Again, my needs were not important, and my protest, my knowledge was ignored because actually I was I was lactose intolerant. But at these years, nobody knew about these things. So the more my needs were ignored and my emotions invalidated, the more the feeling that I was not important was coming back again and again. Now, by the way, these examples may portray my mother as a monster, which she was not. She was herself also socially conditioned when she was young, right? Now, I will share more later about that. So eventually, we move from early childhood to puberty. There, a lot is going on. Now, puberty represents a period of profound transition in terms of drives, emotions, motivation, psychology, social life. You remember, okay? Now, the beginning of adolescence is loosely anchored to the onset of puberty, which brings dramatic alterations in hormone levels and a number of consequent physical changes. Recent preliminary evidence from developmental MRI studies has suggested that the stage of puberty might play an important role in adolescent brain development, perhaps much more so than chronological age. So, to put it simply, this is when your rational mind is developed. Piaget, a most famous child psychologist, marks this as the final stage of his cognitive development theory, which is from 12 years and up, according to his theory. And this stage involves an increase in logic, the ability to use deductive reasoning, and an understanding of abstract ideas. Now, at this stage, the irrational belief you had about yourselves, for me it was, I'm not important, gets anchored. And the way you were feeling about yourselves up to that point gets anchored, and the belief, the fake I, is then established and becomes a cognitive distortion. Now, cognitive distortions are simply ways that your mind convinces you of something that isn't really true. These inaccurate thoughts are usually used to reinforce negative thinking or emotions, like telling yourselves things that sound rational and accurate, but really only serve to keep you feeling bad about yourselves. They are thinking errors, if I could put it this way, errors that blur reality. They are like the lenses. And as a result, you perceive reality inaccurately. So cognitive distortions is another huge subject in psychology, and I must mention psychiatrist Aaron Beck here, who laid the groundwork for the study of this distortion. Based on Beck's cognitive model, a negative outlook on reality, sometimes called negative schema, based on his theory, is a factor in symptoms of emotional dysfunction and poorer subjective well-being. So not to get sidetracked here, when this distorted cognition is anchored in puberty, this is when you, as a result, start to act out on it. This is when your chariot starts getting out of control and is starting a downward spiral, moving more and more away from the truth. Now, when this happens, the little self is identifying with the self-image and the cognitive distortion, this thought, this problem, and start projecting it, I dare to say, for life, unless you wake up. So to bring all the stages of development together and the many centuries of the study of the soul, let us go back to the Phaedrus myth, when the lion and the beast cooperate and the man is able to tame them, then there is balance, right? There is no conflict. In terms of the developmental stages, we could say that the lion is developed in the formative years, from birth to 6, 7 years old, let's say. And in these years, you're pure feeling. And the lion symbolizes the heart and has one head because there's no conflict. Now, the beast is developed in puberty, when it is normal for teenagers to search for their identity and thus explore many things. So the rational mind is developed and the many heads symbolize the conflict. The beast symbolizes the gut brain. The man is developed after puberty, in young adulthood, we would say, anywhere from 18 to 21 years of age. The man has one head, no conflict there, and symbolizes the brain, the mind. So the cooperation of these three is needed for psychosomatic health. And bringing these analogies in practical terms now, I will explain the role of the cognitive distortions I spoke about just now, and how they affect this balance between what we think, what we feel, and what we do. So cognitive distortions are so powerful that many people go through their lives without even realizing it. What does this mean? It means that their soul will never manage to take a glimpse of the one truth, and they will be operating from their fake eye, their self-image, which is a result of what? Social conditioning, the lenses, yeah? Therefore, I find it to be of an extreme importance to show you how, when your psyche identifies with that thinking error and keeps projecting it, what happens to you and how you enter into a vicious circle. This is the thinking error cycle. I will use a diagram to show you briefly this destructive cycle. It starts with the way you think about yourselves, which we saw earlier is a product of social conditioning. So let's say, for example, that you think that you're not good enough, and people will judge you about that. This brings about negative emotions. It could be that you feel angry because other people judge you, or you could feel sad because no matter what you do, you're not good enough, or you're anxious and develop fear of exposure. Or it could be that you're upset because you may perceive a constructive feedback as criticism or even as an attack. You could be depressed, I don't know, because staying in your comfort zone protects you from being judged. So you wallow more and more in self-pity, or you feel lonely because you hide from the world. Now, based on these emotions you are experiencing, symptoms start to manifest in your physiology. You may have a headache or chest pain. It could be any physiological symptom or any disease manifesting here at this stage. And the way you deal with these physical sensations is through dysfunctional behaviors, if you're operating from the place of the fake eye, the self-image, right? So what do people do? They try to numb the discomfort of negative emotions or their physical pain, either by hitting the bottle, overeating, avoiding stressful interactions, situations, isolate more and more. And as a result, these behaviors make you think that you are not good enough, or you messed up again, or that you are a failure. And then you feel even worse about yourself. And the cycle keeps repeating itself. Now, In psychology, we have tools to identify the cognitive distortions and how to tackle this cycle, which is something I work with in my practice a lot. Now, as a COMRA practitioner, clients come to me with a symptom. So for them, this is the beginning of the cycle. And okay, yes, we will treat the symptom with COMRA, right? But then we evaluate how open the client is. Can we explore why he or she has pain, why the symptom is there? For the clients who are open to see what is going on beyond the face value, I bring to them how this cycle works, how the thinking, emotions, and behavior affect each other. And here, psychology and COMRA work well together, as if you remember the first slide about healing is that it is a process of restoration which requires awareness. And to heal the relationship with yourselves and your pain, you also need to respect it. Look again at what is going on. So once my clients start becoming aware and respect what is going on in either one of these stages, only then they can start working on themselves in order to shed the layers of social conditioning, to stop ignoring the true self, and therefore to start their journey of healing. Now, this cycle here is an example of a human soul in Phaedrus myth. So here, everything starts from the appetitive part, the black horse, the beast, which has an excessive appetite for bodily desires, eating, drinking, having sex, doing drugs, right? And it drives the white horse, the lion, down, as it affects how we feel when we know that what we are doing is life destructive. It's not good for us, right? We cannot fool ourselves. So when the two horses team up, so our behavior and desires drive our emotions, we ignore the true self, and the self-image gets control of the chariot. So here the charioteer, who symbolizes true thinking and wisdom, stands no chance. And as a result, our psyche stands no chance to be liberated. So the chariot is driven by the self-image, the fake identity. Thus, when we operate from this thinking error cycle, this is when our mental and physical health starts deteriorating. Okay, now, how can we heal ourselves? Now, I'm sure that each and every one of you is not here by coincidence, and it's probably because you have already started your own journey of adjustment towards the liberation of the soul. Talk to you a little bit about my journey of adjustment, and I will go back to the presentation. So my journey of adjustment started about 11 years ago. Up until that time, for quite a few decades, I was mostly running my life based on my own cognitive distortions and my self-image, the fake I, I'm not important, in charge. So as a result, I chose a career through which my self-image would be happy and was becoming more and more important. So my first degree in the States was on business administration. I majored in marketing. And my ambition at the time was to have my own business so that I could finally prove to my mother and the world around me that I was important. I was not aware of it at the time. I can only see it now because I have embarked on my own journey of adjustment. So my ambitions, driven by my fake identity, the self-image, resulted in a lot of doings. Doing. I was doing a lot of things. So slowly but surely, I managed to have my own business in the corporate world, a quite successful one, I must say. And when I became a CEO and a president of a board of directors, one would think that I would be satisfied. Well, at the time, somehow, I did not feel as satisfied as I was thinking I would be. At the time, actually, I was experiencing severe headaches, and I would often get stiff neck I remember going to the doctor to get cortisone injections for my stiff neck. It was that bad. And one morning I woke up and I asked myself, okay, now what, Panayota? Where to from here? So the thought of me continuing to work long hours, weekends, be on the plane all the time, sleeping at hotels, it was not appealing anymore. So I was experiencing dissatisfaction, low energy, and my headaches kept becoming worse and worse. Now, once I was aware that this was not how I wanted to continue my life, I started wondering what else I could do. Since I was so business oriented and leaving the corporate world was a bit scary, actually it was hugely scary at the time. But at the same time, it was my only option because I could not see myself continuing in this path. So as I was drifting there a bit in search of what to do next, I was feeling a bit lost. I was in limbo, I must say. So I had identified so much with my self-image that I had no clue what else I could do. I only knew I could not continue to be part of the corporate world. And this is when my journey of adjustment started. Actually, I met accidentally, which was not accidentally, a healer here in Greece who brought to my attention that the symptoms in my physiology were a result of an imbalance, an internal conflict. I was like, what? At first, I could not grasp what he was telling me. However, I was eager to learn and was really open to what he was bringing me. So let me go back to the presentation. It started making sense. And this awareness for me was mind-blowing. So I found out that headaches are a result of when we feel bad about ourselves, and that stiff neck means I'm inflexible, there's lack of fluidity. So as I was working with these concepts, trying to truly understand them, he sent me a leaflet about a course that was to take place somewhere in Greece. I read the description of the course, and it was about relationships. So with no second thoughts, I registered and I took a friend with me. And this is when I landed to my first ISM course. Now, ISM stands for Institute for the Study of Man. And this is where I first met Elizabeth Schnug, who was facilitating the course. Elizabeth is the director of ISM and a co-CEO in RLT. So everything she was saying was making sense. And for the following 5 years, not only I did not miss a course, but I also took my son along for a few of those. And then I asked to become the organizer for these courses in Greece so that more people could learn about themselves. So in these 5 years, 2010, 2015, I came face to face with the effects of social conditioning. I learned about what the self-image is, my distorted belief, and I started tapping into my inner power and strength. So the universe is wise, because looking back, I know it was not a coincidence that I met that person, that I landed in this ISM course, where I met all of my friends here at the Comrade team. And also, I learned a lot about the connection between physiology and psychology, and by shedding layer and layer after social conditioning. So as I was doing that, I found my true calling, which is to help people help themselves. And this is also the vision of ISM and RLT. So at the end of 2015, it became clear to me that in order for me to fulfill my purpose in this lifetime, I needed to become a therapist. So I went back to school for a fast-track undergraduate degree in psychology and then a master's degree in counseling psychology and psychotherapy, and here I am. So being a therapist is a path with heart for me. Now, the title of this webinar, This is My Mother and Myself Again, is Psychological Self-Healing. And in the beginning of this presentation, I shared a bit about attachment theory and how the quality of our interaction with our primary caregivers shape us in adulthood. So there is no such thing as a perfect mother, a perfect father, and there are no manuals about how to become a good parent. So the relationship with my mother was conflictual because we were so different. However, I know she loved me dearly and she did the best she could. And in my practice, I keep telling my clients that the reason we need to go back and see what happened in our childhood is not for us to put our parents against the wall and shoot them or remain angry with them for the rest of our lives. Rather, it is for us to be aware about what happened, respect it, look again, look beyond the face value of what happened in order to learn more about ourselves and others, so we can forgive our parents, forgive your parents for whatever it is that you hold against them, so that you can start getting in touch with how you can change how you feel. So forgiveness is a conscious decision we make so that we can work with our emotions, these negative, unforgiving emotions, and replace them with positive, other-oriented emotions, such as, I would say, understanding, empathy, to become more emotionally stable. I was fortunate enough to be able to do that when my mother was still alive, although very ill and at the last year of her life. Being able to see why I was feeling not important and look beyond the face value of my experiences, I was able to work with my anger and finally release myself from this emotional prison. There is so much I could say, not just for each slide, but even for each bullet of each slide, as some concepts could be a webinar in themselves. However, as I shared at the beginning, the purpose of this presentation is to take you on a very compact trip of psychological healing and to barely scratch the surface of this lifetime journey. So now, to start wrapping up with the good news, I would say that when you embark on this journey of adjustment, this journey of your psychological healing, you start experiencing joy. Because the less you deal with controlling the beast, the more you can steer your chariot towards high heaven, the closer you get to joy. I know, not because I have read it in bibliography, but I also know because I have personal experience with it. Being on a path with heart is most uplifting and joyous. So as we are approaching to the end of the presentation, I would like to bring you a take-home message because, okay, I'm sure that each and every one of you have gotten whatever it was that you needed from this presentation. Since I spoke of the thinking error cycle, though, and this is like a program that runs in the background of our operational system, if I could put it this way, in order for you to experience joy, you need to harmonize your thoughts, emotions, and behavior. In order to be healed, what you think, what you feel, and what you do need to be in sync. Now, this is a process, okay? Process of a lifetime. And since we all have had academic schooling, but not true education, as nobody spoke to us about social conditioning and the fake identity, this journey can actually be quite joyous with proper guidance. And in therapy, we use many tools to support the client in his or her journey to joy. As I would like to give you a tool to use on your own, what I see in my practice is that most people are a lot in their minds. They overthink. So overthinking is when the self-image is in control and either thinks excessively about a past event, it's called rumination, or is excessively worrying about a present or a future event. So when the rational mind gets hooked in one thought, which is always negative, it chops, analyzes, repeats, and then there is no room for anything positive to come in. So guess what? It's exhausting. It can waste your emotional energy and make you feel emotionally and physically drained. Overthinking can consume your energy and reduce your ability to make decisions, because cognitions are affected. It sets you up to developing mental illness. When you overthink, this internal dialogue that we have with ourselves all the time, I said to him, he said to me, he did that, or it can snowball into bigger, more extreme negative thinking, and you get into a downward spiral. So anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, borderline personality disorders. We see a lot of them, and the signs there, we see phobias, we see stress, fatigue, for you to identify, indecision, a big result of stress, substance abuse, loneliness, sleeplessness, suicide ideation, excessive food intake, alcohol and drug abuse, smoking, hyper control in life, obsession about failure, fear and anxiety about the future. You get the picture. Now, overthinking also affects your physiology. You develop illnesses, and research suggests that patients with negative thoughts and anxiety have also experienced headaches, stomach problems, and all sorts of body aches that cannot be explained by allopathic medical doctors. And I have to say here that the same happens when you suppress your emotions. It's exactly the same thing. It's the two polarities. So if I could put it simply, overthinking is a toxic habit. What can you do to tackle overthinking, to disentangle these knots of negative emotions? Well, as Robert Frost said, the best way out is always through. So again, here there are so many ways and tools to use in an interactive environment like individual or group therapy, which could not be used here. I couldn't give them to you because they would be worthless. Well, nevertheless, since negative thoughts have to do with the past or the future, so rumination or worry, the best way to tackle that is to be in the here and now. So in this last slide, I will share with you some ways for you to be present. And this can be done by practicing what we call present moment awareness. So your breathing is a tool you all have, no matter where you are. So focusing on your breathing allows mindfulness to make you more peaceful and smooth your interactions with others. So for me, the master of mindfulness is Jon Kabat-Zinn, and my friend Maxime will share with all of you a link about breathing mindfulness in the chat. Thank you, Maxime, for your support. Another good, excellent way to be to use your breathing and to be in the present is also yoga. Now, if you are already doing mindfulness breathing meditation, you could use the body scan mindfulness, again from Jon Kabat-Zinn. This is actually what I do. Maxime will also share a link about that in the chat for whoever of you is interested. Just one note here, don't do the mindfulness meditation before you go to bed and you fall asleep, because the point is for you to stay awake, okay? So you can do it in the evening or in the morning, but don't do it before when you're sleepy and you go to bed. Keeping a journal, it's very helpful to put your internal dialogue on the paper, thus emptying your head from it. And as you write and run out of words, you're able to get in touch with your emotions and learn something about yourself. It could be that you usually magnify things in your head, or it could be that you look at things in a black and white manner, or that you often catastrophize. Keeping a journal helps a lot. Now, mindful reflection is a technique that needs to be done every night before you go to bed. It is a mindful review of the day. And what we do here is you go back to your day, activity by activity. You see yourself, You woke up, you did this, you did that, you went there, you did that, you said that. You see your behavior, what you did or said, how the other people responded, and think what you could do differently, what you could have done differently. So this way, you separate the behavior from the person, and you learn something you could use in the future. You also address the behavior, emotion, thinking cycle, with this practice. Very, very useful. And the memory, very good for the memory. So visualization of your day is something to do every morning. Visualizing your goals is an excellent method for not only making it more likely that you will follow through on your goals, so that you feel good about yourself, but it can also help you become more mindful on a regular basis. So when you have set your daily goals, take a few moments to visualize each one. Then see yourself undertaking each goal and completing each goal today, the same day. Get as much detail as you can get in your visualization so it feels real and within your reach. So when you can see yourself checking the daily goal off your list, move on to the next goal and repeat until you have visualized all of your daily goals. Now, gratitude jar. Oh, so fun. I love that. So a gratitude jar is a very fun way to create a visual reminder of all the blessings in your lives. So essentially, it is a place to record and store everything you're thankful for, whether it's a person, a kind act, a positive detail in your everyday life. Write it down on a slip of paper and stick it in your gratitude jar. So over time, you will have a jar full of all the blessings in your life. And creating a gratitude jar is a very easy, quick, and very inexpensive way. It's a way to build a new habit, of thankfulness, and only takes a few seconds a day. You can decorate it, I have decorated mine really easily. And when you are down in the dumps, just go to the jar and take one piece of paper. It will make a huge difference. And lastly, ask for support. This, for me, was the biggest challenge I ever had, because in my mind, I had it that asking for support is a sign of weakness. However, I realized that it is the most precious thing in life to ask for support. And as I said, this presentation was created with the support of the webinar group of Comra, to whom I'm very grateful. And I also have had my own share of therapy for a few years there. This is it. Yeah, I work with young adults, mostly in their 20s. I have to tell you, it's the most amazing group of individuals. They just need somebody to listen to them, to believe in them. They are fast in grasping things. They're an amazing group of people, I can tell you that. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day, evening, whatever it is, wherever you are. I appreciate your presence here. And if you have any ideas or any concerns or any issues that you would like to learn about in the future, please write to us. Give us some feedback. We'd be happy to receive it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Panayota. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.